All right, thank you for joining us again for our Sister Reach monthly social justice preacher series. I am Dr. Elise Salisbury, Director of Programming at Sister Reach. Sister Reach is a grassroots 501c3 reproductive justice organization founded by Cherie Scott in 2011 in Memphis, Tennessee. Sister Reach supports the reproductive autonomy of women and teens of color, poor and rural women, LGBTQIA people, and their families through the framework of reproductive justice. Sister Reach's mission is to empower our base to live and lead healthy lives, raise healthy families, and live in healthy and sustainable communities. This is achieved through working by a four-pronged strategy: education, policy and advocacy, cultural shift, and harm reduction locally, nationally, as well as internationally. Today, our guest is Pastor Joshua Harper. Reverend Harper was born and raised in Hartsville, Tennessee. In this rural town, he cut his teeth in church singing and eventually accepted the call to preach at age 21. He began his first pastorate at age 28 at Second Congregational United Church of Christ, while starting his own ministry a few years later, Healing a Generation Church. He is an ordained minister in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Pastor Joshua has preached in various contexts and denominations and has ministered as far as the continent of Africa. He has a deep, abiding love for Black preaching, the Black church, Black people, social justice, and education. He holds a Bachelor of Science from Bethel University, a Master of Divinity from Memphis Theological Seminary, and a Master's in Higher Education Administration from Mississippi College. He is a proud member of the Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Please help me welcome our Social Justice Preacher Series Preacher of Black History Month, Pastor Joshua Harper.
All right, thank you, Reverend Doctor. I appreciate it. A few years ago, ladies and gentlemen, I was getting ready to drive back to Nashville. I was on the road. I was on 40, and as I was driving back, I ran into traffic and it was a screeching halt. I didn't know if it was due to construction or if it was due to a head-on collision. Interesting enough, sit in traffic for an inordinate amount of time. And then after a while, the traffic subsided. And then much to my shock, when I got up to where the problem was, this is what I found. I found that there was a tow truck in a ditch. Tow truck in a ditch. Blew my mind. All of the cars, even including me, we were passing by this tow truck. Now, y'all know the preacher in your boy. I started having some revelation. And I thought to myself, all the times that this tow truck helped pull other people out of a ditch, now when it needed somebody to help pull it out, no one was there to be of assistance or there to be found. Ladies and gentlemen, when you talk about Black theology situates itself by looking through Scripture through the lens of that tow truck in a ditch, that it has been forgotten about, that it has been looked over, that it has been left out. And we're not talking about the white Jesus. The white Jesus wouldn't look at that tow truck as one who's been in a ditch. But when you talk about Black theology, that is how it is framed. Dr. James Cone, who many will say is the father of Black theology, and I would add Dr. Albert Clegg as well, talks about how Black theology does not sit on its perch of privilege, but in fact, it looks at Scripture from the bottom up and not from the top down. So you're looking at it from the place of the marginalized and the oppressed and those that are downtrodden. Saying all that to say, I think a perfect particular text, and while the Bible's filled with so much that we could talk about as we use this as an example, I think Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20 is a a key text, particularly when we talk about Black theology. In Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20, there is a gentleman there who the text says is demon possessed. Demon possessed. And that's interesting because the text says that he is demon possessed. It does not call him a demon. And in that particular story, Jesus thinks enough of him to go and meet that man where he is. Now, nobody else is there. This man is in this tomb all by himself, but Jesus meets him where he is. The text does not say he's a demon. The text says that he is demon possessed, and Jesus affirms his humanity by just showing up and sharing space with him. And this indicates for us that Jesus recognized he's a person who just simply has a problem. That despite what other people may feel and think and see, Jesus doesn't see what other people see and what other people have said. That's good news, because as we talk about Black theology, Jesus, the Jesus we know, the Jesus we understand, does not look at us as someone who is to be beat up, does not look at us as someone that is less than, that is always basing everything off of our sin, but Jesus affirms our humanity. This man is just simply a person who has a problem. The interesting part around verse 3 is it says, the man is living in the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with a chain. He's living in the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with a chain. He could not be bound. It's interesting that people perhaps considered him a demon because he couldn't be bound. And that's a lot like how America tends to try and frame Black folks, because you can't bind us. You can't institutionalize us and program us, and because we move to a different rhythm, because we don't say yes sir boss and yes man, we don't go and march to the beat of other people's drums. We cannot be bound, and that's important. That's important because when we talk about Black theology says we are self-determined, that we create our destiny, that we determine what is and is not good for us, and what is and is not better for our fate. He could not be bound. And verse 4 tells us actually why he could be bound. The text says that he was chained hand and foot, but he broke them because he was so strong. He couldn't be bound because he was so strong. Black people, I don't know where you are, but that's good news, because I may need to remind you that the reason why you can't be bound, it's not because we're rebellious. It's not because we go against the grain on purpose. We can't be bound because we are so strong. We've got some elders, some scholars, and some ancestors that have deposited wisdom and strength and power in us that gives us what we need. So we can say we can't be bound because we're so strong. That's good news, that we're so strong. The text tells us that this man, ladies and gentlemen, is cutting on himself. He is cutting on himself. Around about verse 6, as he's cutting on himself, he sees Jesus get out of this boat, and he's looking from afar off. Verse 6 says, he sees Jesus from a distance, and he falls on his knees in front of him. He sees Jesus from afar off. He has a long way to go from getting to where he really needs to be, but he can still see Jesus. Ain't that something? He has a long way to go, but he can still see Jesus, despite our communities being in shambles, despite our schools being underfunded, despite all of the disproportionate statistics that are against us, despite all of the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, we can still see Jesus. Black folks, we ought to give ourselves a round of applause, because despite what America does to us, despite what we have had to deal with and go through many dangers, toils and snares. I feel like preaching, but I'm not. I'm gonna keep it kind of low today. That's good news, because we can still see Jesus. Even when they kidnapped us and took us over the transatlantic, we could still see Jesus. But when we had to worship in the hush harbors and we had to do it our own kind of way, we were not able to be in their churches. That's fine. We could still see Jesus. Jim and Jane Crow laws, we could still see Jesus. All of the Bushes and the Trumps and all of the mass incarceration, we could still see Jesus. We may be afar off, but the good news is we can still see Jesus. That's good news to me. And so the text tells us that in verse 8 that Jesus said to this man, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" He says, "My name is Legion." Legion, ladies and gentlemen, is a military term that denotes 6,000 Roman soldiers. Now, this Roman soldier, these Roman soldiers, this Roman military force were bed buddies with the Roman government. So now we find out really why and what was possessing this demonic man. There was this crooked political system and structure that had overtaken this man, causing him to act out as a person. It is a crooked political system that is causing him to act out as a person. Now, the interesting part is you only see the man's behavior, but you don't see the thing underneath it all that was causing him to do what he was doing. Be careful, ladies and gentlemen, with how we talk about, especially our Black youth stealing cars, and how we talk about Black folks doing this and Black folks doing that. It's easy to talk about and critique what you see with your eyes when you don't critique and see what you cannot see with your eyes. There are some things underneath it all that is pushing and driving personal behaviors that leads us and points us back to these crooked political structures and systems. And I'm really almost done here, because this is what I really wanted to lean in on right here. As we talk about white Jesus and Black theology, Bible says, of course, that Jesus, he pulls these demons out of this man, and he sends the demons into the pigs, and the pigs run down the embankment and they kill themselves. Nobody pushed the pigs. Nobody told the pigs, "Come here, piggy, piggy." The pigs themselves, they killed themselves. The spirits that were in the man that he was able to somehow live through, when the pigs got a hold to him, when the pigs got a hold to him, they drowned. I think that is good news for us, because that lets us know these evil spirits, Black folks, that are trying to torment us, that are trying to kill us and trying to subject us, we don't have to worry. Fret not thyself over these evil doers, because the text tells us that when Jesus gets done, the very thing that's been trying to attack us, they are going to attack themselves. Yeah, you ain't got to worry nothing about it. But the text says that these pigs run down the embankment and they drown. Then we find out that the herdsmen that were watching the pigs, they run into the city to tell everybody what has taken place. And the people in the city, they come out and they see Jesus sitting there, but there is some unusual company. This man, who was once a raving lunatic that they heard and that they saw in the cemetery cutting on himself and hollering. The text says that this man is clothed and in his right mind. The last time that they saw him, he was a raving lunatic. He had lost his mind. He was screaming, he was hollering, he was cutting on himself. But now that they see him, he is sitting beside Jesus and he is clothed and in his right mind. I got to say it one more time because it sounds good to me. That the man that they used to know, who was cutting on himself and doing harm to himself and screaming and hollering in the cemeteries, now he's sitting beside Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And here is the caveat. It's round about Mark chapter 5, verse 15. It says, when they see this man clothed and in his right mind, it says that they celebrate. No, it don't say that. It says that they are excited. No, it don't say that. Mark chapter 5, verse 15 says, when they see this man who was once down bad, it says that they are afraid. That's interesting. That's real interesting to me, because you would think that once somebody is liberated and set free, you would be excited. You would think when somebody says, okay, I may not love how you love, but I'm free, you would be excited. You would think that somebody is able to now live on their own terms and live unapologetically. You would think people would say, I celebrate that. I'm excited for you. But the text says that they are afraid. This is what's interesting to me. This is interesting, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about Black theology. In verse 5, the Bible said that this man was cutting on himself. Now, when he was cutting on himself, nobody was there to be found and nobody said a mumbling word. But now that he is clothed and in his right mind, ladies and gentlemen, it says that they are afraid. Y'all didn't get it? Let me try it one more time. Let me try it like this. In verse 5, when he was doing damage to his epidermis, if you will, they had no issue whatsoever. But in verse 15, now that he has come into consciousness of who he is, now they are afraid. Y'all still ain't got it. Let me try it again. In verse 5, let me say it like this. In verse 5, when he had issues with his skin, they didn't have nothing to say. But now in verse 15, now that he knows his identity and where he comes from, now all of a sudden, they are afraid. Ladies and gentlemen, Black folks all around the world, I think this is good news, and this is a reminder to let you know. You do know when you come into consciousness of your Blackness, that's when they get afraid. Oh, as long as we are fighting and bickering and arguing amongst each other, that don't bother them. But when we come into consciousness about who we really are, that's when people get afraid. When we come into consciousness about the fact that we taught the Greeks and the Romans how to read and how to write. When we come into consciousness that our history did not start in slavery, but our history started when civilizations were built, that's when they get afraid. That is when they get a little bit nervous. There is a governor down in Florida that is doing everything possible to ensure that African American classes are not taught. Can I tell you why? Because he does not want Black kids to come into the knowledge of who they are. It's cool when they do it. It's a problem when we do it. See, it's all lovely when we don't know who we are, but when we stop cutting on our skin and when we come into the revelation of who we are, that we are kings and we are queens and that we come from a mighty good people, when we understand that it ain't no blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that we come from that sets us free. As a matter of fact, now that I'm on that point, how in the world do you hide a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus in Africa? Because the Bible says when Jesus was hidden as King Herod was trying to kill the children, they hid him in Egypt. You can't hide a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus in Africa. Let me try it like this. It says that his feet were like bronze and his hair was like lamb's wool. Can I tell you what that hermeneutic is? That means his hair was nappy and his skin was I thank God for that Negro from Nazareth. Let me say it again. I thank God for that Negro from Nazareth. When you talk about a Black theology, make sure you talk about looking at the text from the bottom up and not from the top down. It is God's will for your life, Black people, that you give power to yourself, that you determine for yourself, that the white man and white folks and white supremacy does not determine your fate, that it does not define who you are. Can I tell you? You define who you are. So in the words of Malcolm, I want to ask you this question. Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate the shape of your lips and the size of your nose? Who taught you to hate your skin so much so that you want to bleach it trying to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate each other so much that you don't want to be around each other? Who taught you that? But my word to you is that Black theology should teach you to take back your rightful place. And at the end of every day, you say to God, God, thank you for making me Black. Ashe and amen.
Bishop. Let me tell you something. It took everything in me to not run around this office. Listen.
I saw it. I saw it. I saw it.
The whole preacher, right?
And I was gonna try to talk it, but I started feeling it.
But look, I don't see any comments in the comment section that we still live. So I'm gonna ask you like some questions because a lot of what you said, I don't think. Let me just say, right, that the 6,000 Legion, the military term, equating that to the systems of oppression and the weight that the man at the tomb was experiencing, right? I don't think we really I've ever heard that. I've never heard that. Let me make that statement. So thank you for that. That was a great interpretation of it. I received that, and also the weight of these systems of oppression and the way that they bind the folks in our community or some of the folks in our community. You're absolutely right. We see the external, but we don't really consider that the weight of these systems is what has caused what we're seeing in our community today. So question, because you hit it on it a little bit. There are laws against wokeness that they're sponsoring. There are laws that are shutting down our ability to read books that align with our Blackness. There are, I'm sure, right? If they'll go that far, there are laws that are probably going to come to shut down any knowledge of the little bit that we know about who we are. What can you say about that and how we should push back on the systems that continue to oppress us and continue to move and in an attempt to continue, let's call it legions, right? That cause some to act out.
So it's a great question. And to be honest, I think part of the problem is we are trying to fit in a system that was never meant for us. So it's always going to be like a square peg in a round hole. And so for me, I think that this is a perfect time to, and for some people, this is too revolutionary, maybe too radical. Let's stop trying to get at their table to get them to understand us. Let's create our own. Let's start working together. Like, let's get on code, as they say, and let's start Afrocentric schools. Let's start having Afrocentric homeschools. Let's do that. Like this is part of the self-determination. The challenge with that is that's hard work. right? That's hard work. And, you know, because of the systemic oppression, we have a tendency to just kind of roll over and play dead in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
But I think that the best that we have and the creativity we have, we don't have to continue trying to get them to understand us or get them to, you know, see where we come from. Let's start our own. Like, let's start our own beyond just entrepreneurship. But when it comes to education, particularly, because as you mentioned, it's now an indictment on wokeness now. Like that is that's what's happening. And so I think miseducation and Carter G. Woodson's text, the miseducation of the Negro, he hit on it. Like let's take back our schools. And you know, I thank God for all of the places that I've been educated and matriculated, and we all do. But at the end of the day, I think we all can acknowledge that stuff really it can institutionalize you to a point where you forget, man, white folks' water ain't better or wetter. Like you know what I'm saying? So why can't we start our own and create our own? So I think being more intentional about that, where we create our own schools, because I really think honestly that's where it all starts, is creating our own schools. As an educator, that's really what I do believe. I think that our best hope is institutional building. And I think the best institution for our communities are still schools. I just believe that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. So to that point, there are, you know, people who will attempt to gather us in order to speak to what marginalizes us, but not allow us at the table. So there are some of us who will still fight for those tables. For those who may be wondering the how, right? Because we can say the what, but how do we migrate from these spaces that want our experience to posture them, but not want our voice? So how would you inform that that we do that, or those who may have that question? How would you inform that they, like, where do they even start, right? To create these rooms and tables that incorporate their voices?
Yeah, I think that the best thing that we can always do, I'm of the opinion that when God gets ready to bless you, he doesn't send you stuff, God sends you people. So I think collaboration is the best. And so I think that while I am a proponent of Black nationalistic approaches, I recognize that that's not everybody's, you know, thing. And what I don't want to do is make it seem like being Black is monolithic, because it's not. But I think that if we learn how to collaborate with anybody who has one, if you're Black and we got one common goal, here it is. If you believe in the liberation of Black people, let's work together. Now, how that looks and how that morphs out, I don't think that that's a big issue. So it's some people, I think they have the wherewithal, the strategy, the acumen to be at those tables, and they even have the patience to do that. I've ran out of the patience for me. So I can't, you know, I'm not going to be best suitable to be at those tables anymore. So I wouldn't be best for me. So I think that collaboration and being able to, you know, piggyback off of each other and have different perspectives, I think that that's going to be the best way. So I don't think that necessarily getting people to come away from that as much as helping us to say, okay, as a people, who is on our side, and how the metric for the people that's on our side is, do you believe in the liberation of Black people? I think that is the way. And again, from a Black nationalist perspective, you got to be Black. You got to be Black. You know, Brother Malcolm, you know, I'm a huge fan of Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. Brother Malcolm was very critical of not white conservatives, but white liberals, mm-hmm. because white liberals are the most dangerous. Let's just call it a spade. let's just keep it a buck. And I think that we got to be very cautious of that. Sure, if they want to, speak truth to power, I think that's good. But I also want you to speak truth with power to your own people. Don't just come over here, say that same thing to your folks. And I think that makes the world of a difference. But I find that that's not oftentimes the case. And so I think that having a language and then having a metric of, okay, do you believe in the liberation of Black people? And then saying, okay, let's collaborate despite what side of the fence you're on. I think it works. When we look at historically from Booker T to W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T was, he was more along the lines of, I guess you would say maybe more conservative in his approach, whereas W.E.B. Du Bois was a Pan-Africanist, Martin and Malcolm. So we've never had, we've always had two different types of movements going at the same time, but they always move towards Black liberation. And I think that that's what's going to be helpful for us if we look at that. So that's what I think.
So to that point, you mentioned something that I've noticed there has been a clash of, right? So in the midst of us are the people at the tomb, the cutters, right? Yep. So there are two different approaches, even to the cutters. What do you say to us who may have conservative approaches versus liberal approaches? And what, in your opinion, is the best approach to the cutters in our community, right? The folks at the tomb who are responding to systems of oppression, not just one, but to several different systems that work at the same time that have been in operation since before we got here. So listening.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's a complex issue. I think that's complex.
It is.
I think that, for me, whether you are, conservative or liberal, I think that at the end, what kind of, when you said that, what kind of came to me was, I find that one of the biggest issues is the respectability piece. Like where the divide kind of goes left is, some people only want to go so far. It's like, well, I want to be diplomatic to a certain degree. And for me, to hell with being diplomatic.
Yes, sir.
I think even if you are conservative, there's a level in which you can say to hell with being diplomatic. Here's my thought with that answer. Speak the truth.
Absolutely.
That is what sets us free. Love don't set us free. That ain't Bible. The truth sets us free. Right? So I'm cool with the different ideologies, whether you're conservative, moderate, liberal, but in all of that, do you speak the truth? Because what I find is you got liberals that lie and you got conservatives that lie. So at the end of the day, do you speak the truth? Yeah. And I think that when you speak the truth, I think inevitably the cutters will find some level of resolve.
Love don't
set us free. The truth sets us free.
Let me tell you something. That's a whole preach by itself. Because it is what you said. It's Bible, it's true, and yes. Woo. Walking away with a lot to ponder. That 6,000, right? It sticks with me. What you lifted about education and us having to lead, because we used to lead education in our communities, right? So going back to that, not just in theory, right, but in strategy and in actualizing, that leading education in our communities again. And so, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely appreciate your presence. Absolutely appreciate all that you've offered. I got to go back and look at this because, yeah, it was so much that you offered in it. We absolutely appreciate you and the time that you've offered again today for the wisdom, your preach, your knowledge, your Blacktivism, all of the above. And so join us next month for our preacher series. We will be announcing who that person will be on the next flyer. I won't announce it now because I don't have that information in front of me, but thank you again for your time. Join us next month for our next Social Justice Preacher series. Until next time, we will see you then.